Hello and welcome back to the Monthly Goddess Alignment Temple. My name is Courtney Tiffany. I'm a writer, priestess, and today I want to talk about Aphrodite and her symbols. For those inside the Monthly Goddess Alignment, May is our month with Aphrodite, diving into the goddess of love. I could not go through Taurus season without working with Aphrodite. Taurus is ruled by the planet Venus. Venus is the Roman equivalent to Aphrodite. And there's something about this energy to just kind of relax and surrender and surround yourself with beauty and tap into that sensuality and the divine feminine. And so we're honoring Aphrodite, and I am releasing my Former Goddess workshop. Every Friday you'll see a new video from that workshop released into the Patreon, your member dashboard. So that one goes through Aphrodite and her myths and her archetypes as like the creatrix and the lover. So I really wanted to spend this week focusing on her symbols, why she has the symbols, why these things represent Aphrodite, and kind of how they all tie together. And I am just a researcher by nature. I like to know, okay, why do we associate these things with the goddess of love? Where did this come from? So I've been diving in, kind of doing my own research all week, and I'm going to come on here today and just share with you what I've discovered. A lot of these symbols can also be used as offerings, as ways to honor her, and we'll kind of see that as we go through. So the first symbol of Aphrodite that I see depicted in a lot of artwork is the dove. The dove was sacred to Aphrodite. Some also mention, there are some texts that also mention sparrow. I don't see that as much, but doves are essentially symbols for purity, for love. They mate for life. Turtle doves mate for life. So there's a lot of themes here in Aphrodite's symbols that have to do with love and beauty, which make perfect sense because she is the goddess of those things. But not only doves, but also waterfowls. More commonly, you see her depicted with swans, but sometimes also ducks or geese, and all white. White ducks, white geese, white swans. Again, because white is the color of purity. Swans also mate for life, so there is that love element there. No matter where they are, they'll always return home. And specifically swans, once they find a mate, they go together everywhere. And backing up just to doves, because I just remembered this. Doves are unique that once they court, they mate for life. They have a much shorter lifespan than swans, where it's 2 years for doves and 20 years for swans. But the males actually take part in the nesting. They take turns incubating the eggs with the females. And if you are at all into animals or biology, like I am, zoology, doves produce crop milk. This isn't something that a lot of birds produce, just doves, pigeons, and I think flamingos. But males and females both produce milk to feed their young, which is usually milk is like a mammalian thing. Mammals produce milk. Hence why they're mammals. But I just found it interesting that doves do. And milk is very much also a sacred symbol of a lot of fertility goddesses, a lot of mother goddesses, because milk is essentially the essence of life, right? You're giving life. You are sustaining this creation, this baby, right? And helping it grow into a human being or whatever. So Yeah, doves produce milk. Fun fact for you. So as far as animals, you got doves, the waterfowls, the swans, geese, ducks. Doves are also said to pull Aphrodite's chariot. So her chariot is like this golden, bedazzled, jeweled chariot, and the doves. There are some texts referencing like doves pulling her chariot across the skies. And I think that's where like sparrows got thrown in there too. But one other animal that she's associated with is dolphins. I haven't found, like, they're just kind of there. I haven't done enough research yet as to why dolphins are associated with her, but Aphrodite was born of the sea foam. So in her origin story, Kronos castrates his father Uranus. Uranus's like testicles basically get thrown into the ocean, and it's from that combination of the ocean and this like semen that Aphrodite rises up, and she's born like fully formed, fully grown woman, naked, like in her purest natural form, the most radiant being, right? And then she is her myth, it's the east wind that carries her to shore. And like you see a lot of images of her riding a clamshell into shore. So maybe the dolphins were a part of that. There's a lot of mermaid lore, specifically like in Cyprus and also the Amalfi Coast. I know a lot of Aphrodite priestesses also have this like connection with mermaids. So I'm wondering if like dolphins, mermaids, all that is also kind of representative of Aphrodite. But like I said, I haven't done enough research into why. But just something to note. And Seashells, obviously, she's a goddess of the sea. Aphros in Greek means sea foam. So she rose from the sea foam and was carried to shore. There is a rock like in Cyprus off the coast where it basically is said that she was born. She was very much the local deity there before she kind of branched out and was adopted by other like the Grecian Empire, right? And the Roman Empire. But yeah, so there's dolphins and mermaids. Seashells are a huge one for Aphrodite. There is so much artwork. Specifically, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. And I don't know anybody who hasn't seen this painting. I mean, but she's standing there nude and, you know, on a seashell. And it was the very thing that carried her to shore in her origin story. I should note that Homer attributes Zeus as her father and Dione as her mother. I have very strong feelings about this. Homer was a man. I feel like by saying Zeus was her father, like it's basically just saying all roads lead back to Zeus. Zeus is god of gods. It's very patriarchal to think that way in her lineage. I much prefer, you know, her rising from the sea foam, because what goddess? Like, it's much more mystical. It's much more like deity-like to be birthed by this like crazy catastrophic event. I mean, to be born from the sea and the mixture of like a castrated god. Like there's just so much. There's just so much to take in there. And so I prefer to view that as her origin story rather than Homer's simplistic, like, oh, no, she's the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Yeah, I don't believe all roads lead back to Zeus as Homer would have us believe. But that's for another video. Pearls and seashells. So seashells are fundamental. Seashells are a representation of the feminine. So when you think she was born from essentially male genitalia, here she is rising up and she is female, right? She is a goddess, and the inside of the shell is very symbolic of that. And then pearls are essentially, I mean, I like to think of them as like a gift from the ocean, right? Pearls are formed when an irritant, like a bug or like a parasite or a grain of sand, a lot of people say, gets into the shell. And essentially the oyster or the mollusk or clam, whatever it is, secretes this liquid surrounding this irritant, and it just keeps adding layer and layer and layer until pearl is formed. So I'm repping my pearls today. These are not real, but that would be cool. Pearls are also extremely rare. Only like 1 in like millions of shells produce pearls. Most of the pearls that we get now are factory farmed. But pearls are the only gemstone that doesn't need to be mined, cut, or polished. Pearls are essentially, they're just natural. They have this natural beauty, very much like Aphrodite. And we see that represented as her being nude, right? It's her natural beauty. It's her taking her natural form. And I love that pearls represent that. Pearls are a great offering to her, to, you know, have them on your altar if you have an altar for her. Pearls and seashells. And then while I was doing my research, the nerd that I am, again, it's like back to the crop milk thing. So, fun fact, oysters actually can change genders, making them hermaphroditic. And if you know the stories, if you know kind of the genealogy of Aphrodite and Hermes, the god, the messenger god, had a child called Hermaphroditus. And he was androgynous. And, you know, Aphrodite very much calls us to kind of explore our sexuality, right? It's one of her many lessons. And I just love that, like, her symbol of the shell and the pearl and just the oyster itself. Also, oysters are an aphrodisiac. Let's not forget that. But the fact that, like, you know, males turn into females and, like, vice versa, like, that oysters are hermaphroditic, just, it's just like the cherry on top, like, thus confirming, also tying into this whole Aphrodite symbolism. So I had to share that. Some fruits that are associated with Aphrodite are pomegranates, and more specifically the apple. I feel like the apple is more representative of her. Across many traditions, you see apples being representative of the love and fertility goddesses. I tend to associate pomegranates more so with Persephone, because it's in her story. It's the pomegranate that Hades gives to Persephone, which they refer to as the fruit of the dead, thus tying her to the underworld. So she's forced to live there. Forced. Whether she took it willingly or not, we'll never know. But anyways, and then also with the pomegranate in Sumerian mythology, we also see the Sumerians believe that the pomegranate was the fruit of the dead. If you ate the pomegranate, if a ghost ate a pomegranate, essentially it would provide them with immortality. So I tend to think of pomegranates as underworld, Persephone, dark goddess symbols, more, and the apples more so as fertility. That's just my personal opinion. Apples also have a pentagram inside of them, or a star. So if you slice an apple in half, there's 5 seeds. This has a ton of symbolism in and of itself. So if you look, so Aphrodite is essentially like this descendant from Inanna, right? Inanna was the first documented love and fertility goddess in Sumerian culture, and then it she turned into Ishtar, Astarte, and then we see Aphrodite. So I tend to think of that, but Inanna was considered the morning star or the evening star, very much, and she was a queen of heaven and earth. So they associated her with the planet Venus. Venus, again, being the Roman equivalent of Aphrodite. So all of these goddesses are very similar. Aphrodite being the only one that I know of that has that tie with the ocean. And her origin story is very specific and unique to her. But this idea of Venus, right, the morning star, being associated and tying all of these fertility goddesses together. And again, going back to the apple and the pentagram inside, the star shape that is made from the seeds. When you look at Venus in the sky, her pattern makes, when she like rotates around the sun, makes this essentially pentagram. It's called the Pentagram of Venus, and I'll try and put a picture here to show you. I had somebody point this out to me. I didn't know. I associated apples with Aphrodite, but not the pentagram per se. The star, yes. The star, the morning star, the bright star being the planet Venus itself in the sky. I get that, but I didn't know that Venus made this pentagram essentially in the sky. And I loved this when I found out. I'm like, of course, it makes so much sense. And it kind of looks like a flower. And somebody pointed out, like the 5 petals on a flower. Any flower that's sacred to Aphrodite also has this symbolism. I don't know much about sacred geometry. I know it is like this huge topic, and there are people, that have studied it and know a lot more than I do. So I didn't make this connection until somebody pointed it out to me. So, but I want to share it with you because I just love how it all weaves together, right? Like the pearls and the hermaphroditic oysters, and like the doves and the chariot and like all of it, right? It's all connected, and I love weaving together like how all of these symbols connect back to her. And I don't know, I'm a nerd like that. I'm just sharing my nerdiness with you. But moving on. So Venus, pentagram, star, it's all Aphrodite. It's all Aphrodite. Apples also being a great offering to her too. Whenever you're creating an altar, I will just say, like, if you're going to leave food out, you don't leave it out for too long. Obviously, once it starts to go bad, you need to toss it. But yeah. Another thing you could leave out for her is also wine or honey. I forget what I was reading, but I found this. It might have been like a blog post or something on Aphrodite and her symbols, but somebody had mentioned bees and how she's kind of like the queen bee. And there's so much symbolism there, but bees produce honey, right? Honey is sweet. Honey is nectar. Honey is, again, like this beautiful gift, this byproduct, just like the pearl. The pearl is a byproduct of the seashell and the sea, right? It's just this naturally occurring gift. And honey or wine is like a good offering for her as well. Also roses. I mentioned also the 5-petaled flowers, but I tend to associate a lot of roses with Aphrodite. And then the myrtle tree is sacred to her too. Going back to apples just really quickly, obviously, if you've ever read the myth, the apple of discord, where the goddess Eris, she's the goddess of discord, was all upset because she wasn't invited to somebody's wedding and all the other gods and goddesses were there. So she threw this golden apple into the room and it said, "For the fairest." And then, of course, all the goddesses are fighting over it. You know, and essentially, long story short, Aphrodite is named the fairest of them all. Yeah, you could just go down the line of apples, I feel like, being a symbol, starting as a symbol for the fertility goddesses, but then seeing how the apple kind of transforms during, like, when the Christian Roman Empire kind of took over. And then we get the story of Adam and Eve eating an apple from the tree of knowledge, and it essentially becoming sin, equating with sin, which is very much how the Roman Empire took over all of Aphrodite's temples and converted them into chapels and to Christian temples or churches. And there's so many layers there. There's so many layers there with the apple. You know, going from sex and fertility, like juiciness, like the sweetness of just the apple itself, and representing this naked, beautiful goddess, right, in all her glory, and then turning it into this thing of sin, right? Like this forbidden thing, which is very much what happened with our sexuality. Like everyone felt very sinful, and sexuality was very kind of like toned down and hush hush, and people were like made to feel shameful because of it. And then I can't get this image out of my head of just Snow White eating the apple, right? Like for you, like just that shiny red apple that holds so much poison. There's just so much symbolism there. And symbolism of the evolution of the goddess, right? There's also a ton of ties. You could very easily tie Aphrodite to Mary Magdalene. So there's a lot there to explore, and I think I've just kind of like brain dumped a ton of stuff. But like I said, I've done other videos on Aphrodite's myths and other things, so I really just wanted to take the time to just focus on her symbols specifically. One, to kind of help you understand why we associate these things with the goddess, right? All of these things are considered pure. They symbolize love and they symbolize beauty, is really what it comes down to. And that is the essence of Aphrodite herself. All of these symbols are also things that, you know, are naturally occurring, things that we can easily bring to her as offerings. We can decorate our altars, you know, if you have a statue of the goddess, if you collect seashells, or if you have a strand of pearls. I tend to associate her with like red, pink, and white. So if you have like any of those colored candles, you can easily create something in honor of her. So I hope you found this informative. I want to dive in. There's, again, so many layers to Aphrodite. She's so much more than just the goddess of love. So over the next coming weeks, we'll be diving in every week, just a different facet of her. And I'll be releasing all that inside the Monthly Goddess Temple. If you want to do the workshop, it is again inside the Monthly Goddess Temple. And that's just that's like my sacred space. That is where I house all of my content. I only release certain things to YouTube that I feel like would be beneficial to the masses. So if you're interested in diving further, you can join us there on Patreon. And there's a whole guided meditation library. And there's going to be 2 meditations this month with Aphrodite and connecting to the lover aspect of her and the lover aspect within self. So would love to have you join us if you feel called to, and I will see you next week.